And welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, coming at you with another solo episode this week. And in week 6, we got a ton of new information. There were a ton of injuries, unfortunately, concussions, knees, just a lot of injuries this week. Shoulder from Dontavian Wicks. Like there was just, unfortunately, a very large number of injuries. So thankfully, week 7 is a pretty thin bye week. So ideally, you will have a little bit more of your team back to full strength this week, but overall, the waiver wire is going to be very important this week. So without further ado, let's get into the ads of the week. So the first guy that I want to talk about here is DeMario Douglas. So he was awesome in this game with the first start for Drake Maye. Drake Maye looked great throwing the ball. And, maybe it's a little bit of fool's gold for his first start once they get a little bit more tape on him, figure out what he likes to do, throw different things at him defensively. But in this first start, right, he had 3 touchdowns, 245 yards. DeMario Douglas was the feature of the offense, right? He had 9 targets, 6 for 92 and a touchdown. And that makes 3 out of his last 4 games where he's had 9 targets. So his snap share is still low. So I don't know if they're planning on changing his role a little bit to get him on the field during 2 wide receiver sets. There was, rumors that he was talking to the coaching staff about possibly figuring out a way to get him on the field a little bit more, which would just increase his volume. But at this point, I think with what we saw from Maye in his first start, that Douglas is somebody that you want to get onto your team. So in a good matchup this coming week against Jacksonville, I'm going to be probably ranking him in the top 25 receivers, which in a 3 wide receiver league puts him firmly in the starting conversation. And so if you need a guy this week, if you're dealing with injuries, or if you're just, looking to improve your bench, this is the number 1 guy that I would go and get this week. I do really think that his role is about to strengthen, that Maye is going to be very good for this passing offense. Their schedule does get very difficult after this week against Jacksonville. So 8 through 13, I think it was. Very difficult schedule, right? So maybe he's not quite as desirable. So I wouldn't go crazy with the fab, because this isn't somebody I think you're going to be starting every week. And if you get to full strength, right, he probably goes back to one of your bench spots. And you don't want to be blowing a lot of fab on somebody that you can put on your bench, or somebody that might end up back as bottom of roster guy. So 5 to 10% here on DeMario Douglas, depending on how badly you need him this week. The next guy I want to talk about is JuJu Smith-Schuster. So he was on bye last week, but in week 5, he had 7 for 130. I assumed his roster percentage was going to be way higher than this. I went and checked just to be sure as I was putting together this information this week, and it was only 33%. So I was like, oh man, we got to, now that he's coming out of his bye week, you don't have to worry about that so much. You definitely want to get him added. Kansas City is obviously in the market for a receiver. I still think Amari Cooper to Kansas City makes way too much sense. So if that does happen, obviously that'll impact JuJu. So again, one of those things where I don't want to drop a ton of fab on him. But 5 to 10% again here as well feels right. And you can start him until there is something that happens in the trade market for the Chiefs at receivers. So really like JuJu as an ad this week as well. I do think with all the receiver injuries that we saw this week, that people are going to be looking for somebody to play. And both of these guys, I think, are plug and plays for this week and possibly beyond. So make sure you go and look for both of these guys on your waiver wires. Getting into the rest of the waiver wire ads, the first quarterback that I want to talk about, and the only quarterback I guess I want to talk about, I mentioned it with DeMario Douglas, is Drake Maye here. So Drake Maye looked great. I obviously 245 yards and 3 touchdowns. Hard to diminish that with his first week. He had a good deep ball. He threw one to DeMario Douglas. That was like a 35-yarder. And then he also had one to the tight end as well, right? So there is still value there with Hunter Henry, and showed that he kind of could spread the ball around and that he could hit different receivers at different levels of the field. So I was very encouraged by that. He also is very underrated as a rusher. He had 5 carries for over 30 yards. So that's a little bit sprinkled on top, right? Can add to his floor. So in superflex leagues especially, right, I'm guessing he already got added in your superflex leagues, but just in case he didn't, you need to make sure you go and get Maye this week, right? And he's somebody that in a superflex league, that's where you're going to spend your fab for this week, right? You're going to go spend 20 to 25% to get Drake Maye onto your bench. Moving on to the next position, we got running back, and we got Kimani Vidal. And this is somebody in the preseason that I did not like very much at all. I didn't think he was going to play. And I did say at that point that he's going to need an injury either to Dobbins or Gus to pay off, right? So now that we have an injury to Gus, he gets his first run on the team, which I think was kind of how we expected it to go. And his first touch goes for a 38-yard receiving touchdown, wheel route down the sideline. It was actually a deep shot too. It wasn't like a screen or anything, caught it over the shoulder and kind of waltzed in. And that was extremely encouraging to see. I mean, he can contribute as a pass catcher. That might cut into Dobbins' work a little bit, but I don't really think so. Dobbins had 25 carries. He dominated the work in the ground game here. So Vidal, minimal value, I think. At this point, I would only put $1 or $2 if you need a running back. But while Gus is out, if they do decide to spell Dobbins a little bit more in these coming games, or if anything were to happen to Dobbins over the next 4 weeks while Gus is out, Vidal would become an immediate starter. So I do think Dobbins is still the guy, but Vidal is somebody that from this running back group, I think you can add to your roster and feel pretty confident that he can get you 5 to 8 touches at this point and possibly score. The next guy I want to talk about is Jaylen Warren. So his roster percentage has dipped all the way down to 42%. He has not been healthy throughout this year, right? He came into the year banged up, couldn't get right, then got hurt again, missed multiple games, and then came back, played 37% of the snaps. So not a ton of work here. And obviously Najee's been dominating the carries and the passing game work. But I think as he continues to get healthier, that there's going to be something here with Warren and that there's going to be a role for him in this Arthur Smith offense. So Warren is somebody that I still would want to add to my team. This is a longer term play. This isn't somebody you're going to be able to plug and play within the next couple of weeks. I know their bye week is coming up in week 9, I believe. So maybe after that, he gets a little bit more fully up to speed. And over the second half of the year, he's able to help you. So this is somebody, if you have a roster spot open on the end of your bench, this is somebody that I would want to be trying to hang on to for as long as I could. The third guy I want to talk about here is Guerendo. Jordan Mason, we saw get hurt, shoulder injury, left the game, and Guerendo played the entire second half. This is a elite athlete. So he was one of the top, if not the top athlete at running back coming out of this year's draft. And, you know, he displayed that on his big run down the sideline. Obviously, he didn't get in. It was more beneficial for him to get down. It did look like he got caught a little bit, but I think he started to pull up as he realized that he couldn't just go all the way into the end zone. So if Mason doesn't play, he's going to be a top 10 play this week, right? So you want to add him to your rosters if you can get him, and just make sure that Mason's going to play. If he is, then you could probably cut him. But even if Mason is active and goes, like, there's a chance that he's banged up and this turns into more of a 70-30, 60-40 split for this week alone. So if you have the space and can keep him on your bench, I think that that's probably a favorable thing to do for your rosters this week, especially if you're a CMC or Mason owner. Just making sure that you have an option here at running back if Mason were to miss. The last guy I want to talk about here, kind of have to talk about him in half PPR. He scored 32 points last week. Sean Tucker. Rachaad White was out with injury this past week, and so Tucker kind of took in that number 2 role, and he dominated in that role. I mean, he went over 130 yards. He had almost 10 yards a carry. He had a receiving touchdown, 50 receiving yards. It was a masterclass at running back from him this week. I will say that they got way ahead of New Orleans, and he racked up a lot of those stats in the fourth quarter. He had like 9 of his 14 carries and 100 of his rushing yards in the fourth quarter. And that was after Bucky had kind of been taken out of the game more or less just because they were winning by so much. Bucky played 75% of the snaps over the first 3 quarters. It was not really Tucker time until the fourth quarter. He did score his receiving touchdown before that, but it was not something that was looking like he was going to have this big of a game. He obviously had the touchdown and 50 receiving yards, so he was going to have a productive day overall, but the rushing really came when the game was out of hand. So I'm not sure that this is going to translate. I'm not sure if this is going to earn him a bigger role. Like if White comes back and then he's involved, this backfield might just get really murky, or White might just lose value if they decide to stick with Bucky as their featured guy. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I just have to add him to the waiver ads here because of how significant his game was this past week. Another honorable mention, if you're listening, Ty Chandler. In case Aaron Jones doesn't go, keep an eye on him. I didn't re-add him to this video. He was on here last week. But if Aaron Jones doesn't go, obviously Ty Chandler is somebody you want. If Aaron Jones is going to go, don't necessarily need to get Ty Chandler. At wide receiver, the top option here, I know I try and keep it below 50%. ownership, but 51% ownership. Romeo Doubs, right? He was suspended in week 5, didn't show up to practice, was frustrated with his role, and then he comes out in week 6 and has 3 catches for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns. There wasn't a ton of focus on any one player in the Packers offense this week. And then they got way ahead of Arizona. So then it turned into running the ball, grinding the clock. But overall, he was productive in the touchdown area. That's where he's known for being good as well. I mean, he's a big body. He's always out there on the field. So it was good to see him immediately off the suspension, come back, practice in full, and be very productive in his first game. So if you did drop Doubs, or if he is available in your league, go ahead and throw a bid at him, probably $5 to $7 fab. That's probably what I would think it would be required to get him. And he's somebody that over the rest of the year, I think definitely can be valuable in this Packers offense. He's always out there on the field too. So, every once in a while, he can go for 2 touchdowns, right? I mean, it's not very often he goes over 100 yards just in general, but, his ability to score is up there with the best of them. The second receiver, this goes hand in hand with the Marvin Harrison Jr. injury, out with a concussion. Players rarely come back in that next week after a concussion with the new protocols. So I do expect Harrison to miss this week. And so that makes Michael Wilson, again, a pretty valuable contributor here, I think. And could be the focal point of the offense. Obviously, McBride is the one that's going to get loaded up with all the targets. He had 8 for 80 or 8 for 98, I think it was, and he had like almost 9-10 targets. So obviously he gets a huge volume, but I do think is the number one option down the field. Michael Wilson could break one loose, or he could just see a decent number of targets and end up with close to 100 yards in this game without Marvin Harrison. So this is somebody, again, in deeper leagues that I think you should be throwing a couple dollars at, see if you can get. And if you're stuck and really need a player for this week, Wilson could be your guy. The last receiver I want to talk about here is Noah Brown. So I did think, even from the very beginning of the year when Washington first acquired him, that Noah Brown was going to step into that number 2 role. They had a couple guys already there. McCaffrey was going to be the 3 in the slot, but they really were looking for a number 2 opposite of McLaurin. And 3 weeks ago in week 5, right, or in week 4, I'm sorry, it started to look like he was going to take over that role. He was playing a lot, and then he got hurt, right? And then he missed week 5. And then in week 6, he comes back, has 8 targets, leads the team 4 for 60. And he had a 30-ish yard pass interference call go for him as well. So obviously those don't count as points, but it just is another play that he contributed where he didn't even necessarily get credited with that target. But he seemed to be ascending in terms of role in this offense. And we all know that this offense is a very good offense right now with Jayden Daniels looking awesome. So I've been trying to figure out, we've talked about Luke McCaffrey, we've talked about Noah Brown, been trying to kind of reconcile who's going to be the one you want and how or when the best time to add these guys is. So I think at this point now, Noah Brown looking healthy, coming off of an 8-target game, it's probably when you want to get him. He could really get things rolling here over the second half of the season. Moving on to tight ends. So I'm majorly cheating with this one in terms of my 50% roster percentage, going with Evan Engram as the first guy to look for. He's 75% rostered, but after a 10 for 102 game in his first game back from a hamstring injury, he was dominating the target share. Lawrence was looking for him early and often. It really kind of hurt the other pass catchers on the team, honestly, too. I do think, too, the running game never got going in this game, so he operated almost as an extension of the running game. So I don't know if they get that fixed and Engram's volume decreases because of that. But if he's available in your league with how bad tight end has been, this is somebody that you have to go get. Okay, 100% rostered is the minimum for Engram at this point. If he's available in your leagues, you want to go get him 10 to 15% fab on him if your waiver wire looks thin at tight end. If you play in a 10-team league where 2 tight ends aren't really owned and there's some decent options on the waiver wire, maybe you go a little less, right? Know your league on that, maybe 5 to 7 on Engram. But with his possible floor from a catch volume standpoint, right, he was number 4 in the league in receptions last year, not just among tight ends, amongst all pass catchers. So there is quite a decent floor here. And if he gets any sort of touchdown luck, this could be somebody that you really want to be playing over the second half of the year. And the last tight end we're going to talk about here is Hunter Henry. I mentioned it with Drake Maye. I mentioned it with DeMario Douglas. Getting these Patriots back onto your teams, I think is something that you want to be doing, especially the pass catchers with Maye looking as good as he did in his first start. And Henry had a touchdown, right? He didn't necessarily get a ton of volume, but he did have 3 for 40 and a touchdown. He is tight end 10 on the year, miraculously, right? I mean, tight end has been so bad. But if Maye is going to look as good as he did and continue to play that well, Hunter Henry's going to benefit from that. So you want to see, again, in a deeper tight end league, you want to try and get him back onto your roster if you're able to. All right, so moving over to the trade targets now. So we got some interesting plays this week just out of, players that are going on bye. We had some really poor performances. So that's going to be kind of the theme of this entire segment here. I'm starting off with Dak Prescott. So he's a combination of the both of what I just said, right? I mean, he had a terrible game where he only scored 3 points and he's going on bye this week. So, in your one quarterback leagues, he might be somebody that you can get for really cheap, right? He might even be a possible drop candidate for the owner that has him in a one quarterback league. But I do think his schedule lightens considerably and he can be a top 5 to 7 quarterback the rest of the season. So go out and get Dak if he's that cheap. In your super flex leagues, there's a chance you drafted him as quarterback 9, 10, right? And if you picked a player in that similar range at receiver, we just had a trade in our league go down Dak for Debo. It wasn't exactly that. There was some other things involved, but that was the feature player going back for Dak. So, if you can get your third quarterback plus a player like Debo or a player in that 4th to 5th round range, maybe Devontae Adams situation gets figured out, he gets healed or he gets traded, and you can pair Devontae Adams with one of your lower quarterbacks for Dak, then that could work out pretty well. Moving on to my second target at QB is Geno Smith. So I was actually looking at his stats over the year, right? He shows up as QB 6, but he doesn't have a single game this year with multiple passing touchdowns. That seems almost impossible. I know he's leading the league in passing, so that helps elevate him a lot, but the touchdown luck has been insanely bad. He does have a rushing touchdown in week 1, so that's kind of helped elevate him a little bit. But I do think that the touchdown luck through the air is going to improve as the season goes on. So maybe the yardage isn't quite as good, but the touchdowns do increase. And if anybody that has Geno doesn't view him as a QB1, and you can make a similar trade for him as you can for Dak, or even lower if people's perception of him is still in that 15 to 18 quarterback range, and you can take somebody like, I guess Derek Carr's hurt now, but that's kind of the guy I always go to. But your third quarterback on your bench and a possible starter at receiver, a possible starter at running back, like a J.K. Dobbins. And in your super flex leagues, you can go get Geno Smith. If you're struggling at quarterback, you have Aaron Rodgers maybe. You can go up, Trevor Lawrence, you can go up and get Geno. I think that that's very, very doable. And I think it would improve your team a lot. Being able to confidently start a quarterback who's had bad touchdown luck, but is still performing well, I think is a recipe for success. So Geno is somebody who was drafted really lowly. If they're not viewing him as a top 12 quarterback, top 14, 13 quarterback in that range, and they're still viewing him down at 18, and they don't see a big step back from Geno to like Trevor Lawrence, like I said, take advantage of that in your leagues and go try and get Geno on the cheap. And again, if somebody does value him as a top 10 quarterback, then, you just tip your cap, right? And you just say, okay, well, that's kind of, I was trying to get him on a discount, but since you view him, as that for the rest of the year, then, I'm not necessarily interested. But there's a chance that Geno's owner has been struggling with injuries just because almost everybody's been struggling with injuries. And so, this week could be a good time to go and get Geno, especially if that owner is not thinking that he's going to be as good as he's been so far. At running back, we have Jahmyr Gibbs. So this one might be difficult to get, right? Gibbs has obviously been very good and has scored double-digit points every week. He has been involved in the passing game. He's been scoring touchdowns. It's not exactly like he's been bad. The discussion here, or the way you can maybe get him from the owner who has him, is highlighting how good David Montgomery has been, highlighting the fact that David Montgomery just got an extension, highlighting the fact that David Montgomery is the starter always gets the first touch. I know Montgomery scored twice this past week, but he was in on another goal to go situation where he got stopped at the one, could have had a third touchdown. So, and the offense obviously is very good overall. So Goff has been throwing a lot the last 2 weeks as well. And Gibbs has been a little bit involved in that. But I mean, they literally were throwing it to Tim Patrick. They were throwing it to Khalif Raymond, who led the team in targets this week. So I own Gibbs in a league, and I'm like, oh, he's been solid, he's been good, but it's just leaving something to be desired. So if you can go and get Gibbs for something relatively cheap, Aaron Jones coming off bye, if you can turn Aaron Jones plus a, Wan'Dale Robinson or plus a Rashid Shaheed or plus a Terry McLaurin, and you can move up and get Gibbs, that's something that I would think would be advantageous for you the rest of the year, despite how good Aaron Jones has been. I think Gibbs, younger, more explosive, in an awesome offense, should be better moving forward than he has been, even though he's been solid this year. I think that that's something that you could that you could possibly get done at this point and could help you over the rest of your season. Next guy, going back to the on bye this week, DeAndre Swift. He has been awesome over the last 3 weeks, right? It seemed like he was going to get benched and people were starting to drop him. And then he just decided to start going off. So Swift is awesome. I would definitely want to be acquiring Swift if you can. Chicago's schedule just gets super easy to over the rest of the year. I know they have a lot of divisional games between week 10 and week 16, I think it is, or 15, which is a really tough stretch of games. But I think Swift is going to be the focal point on the ground. He's involved in the passing game at this point now. This is somebody that you want to make sure you get on your team. If whoever has Swift either added him off the waiver wire, right, and is struggling, or they just started 0-3, and maybe they're 2-3 now, but maybe they lost one of the other 2 weeks. And so, maybe they need help this week and he's going to be on bye. So if you can kind of sell that and go up and get Swift, that's something that you should definitely explore and definitely try to get him on your team. I know in my league, the guy that's 1-5 has Swift, so he might be on the move this week, but we'll see how that specific situation plays out, but that could be the case in your leagues as well. So go and check in with the Swift owner and try to package something. I mean, that's the thing, is you have to pay something really good for him at this point. Whereas 2 weeks ago, you could have got him for almost free. So it's tough when a player's value swings that much, that quickly, to kind of know what to offer and what would be not offensive. You want to start lower than maybe you would end up at, and you don't want to overpay right at the beginning. I'm not even sure exactly what you would have to give up for him, but like Devontae Adams for him straight up, if Adams' situation gets solved, I think that at this point, that's not out of the question. Like, I do think that if you need running back help, and you're in a good spot and you haven't been using Adams, like the chances are you've added somebody to your team that's been very helpful at receiver, and you could kind of give him up for Swift. And I think that would be a totally reasonable trade. And the Swift owner might say no, even though Adams is so good and, could be on the move, but, Adams hasn't been playing. So it's kind of that weird situation. But Swift, definitely somebody that's elevated up into the upper echelons of running backs now. I do expect to see him in at least the top 15 of rankings when you look that up week to week, with potential for a lot more than that moving forward. Last guy I wanted to mention here briefly is Jonathon Brooks. It looks like he's going to start practicing this week. So maybe he doesn't come back this week, but maybe it's next week or the week after. With how good Chuba Hubbard is looking, I know there's some people that are starting to say, look, he's earned a role, or however you want to frame it. But Jonathon Brooks, when he's back, I think is a better pass catcher than Chuba, so he should assume that role almost right away upon being healthy. And I do think at least a split 50-50 in the rushing department should evolve over the first 2 to 3 weeks that he's healthy. It's really hard to judge at this point. We don't know how healthy he's going to be. We don't know how explosive he's going to look. We just have a lot of question marks with him over the rest of the season. But again, sell that, use that to go get him and get him cheap. If you can trade, you just added JuJu Smith-Schuster to your rosters. You can trade JuJu to get Brooks. Definitely be doing trades like that. So check in with the Brooks owner. If you own Chuba Hubbard as well, go and get Brooks for cheap. Go and get Brooks for that Dontavian Wicks off your bench. Well, probably not now, but Christian Watson off your bench. Go and get Brooks for, maybe somebody a little bit lower at running back, like add a Rashad White, if somebody still has some hope there for with a Trey Tucker, who had a bad game, so maybe not him, but like that level of player. Maybe you just added DeMario Douglas and you can package him with Rachaad White to get Brooks. Like those type of deals. Now you open up a couple roster spots, you add him to your IR slot, and you possibly have something over the last 5 to 7 games of the year here with Brooks. That's something you want to be doing. Moving on to wide receiver, we got DJ Moore. So this, again, similarly to Dak, mixes the just played terribly with going on bye week. So I don't know that you're going to be able to get a lot. Or you're going to be able to get DJ Moore from his owner, right? He just had that massive game 2 weeks ago. But we did just see Cole Kmet and Keenan Allen go off against Jacksonville, and DJ Moore do nothing when he was kind of expected to be very good in this game, right? I mean, that's one of the best matchups you're going to get, and it was other players on his offense that went off, and that was kind of the preseason, what we were talking about with this offense overall, that there's just so many playmakers that you never know week to week what's going to happen. I do think that we thought Cole Kmet was going to be like a distant fourth, but the fact that he's kind of evolved into a role that's very predominant in this offense is difficult for all of the pass catchers on this team. So if you can sell that, if the DJ Moore owners 2-4, go and get him now, because I do think over the rest of the season, I did mention that the Bears have a very easy schedule over the rest of the season, and DJ Moore will be a big part of kind of picking that apart. Caleb Williams over the last 2 weeks has looked excellent. DJ Moore is his number one target. I do think that this is something that could really be a boost for your teams moving forward. And again, this is somebody I would try and buy low on. And I know he just had a good game 2 weeks ago, but over the full season, he really hasn't been that good. Wide receiver 20 overall, but it's being fueled by that 25-point game. And I just think that he's going to be better than this. I believe in the talent. I believe in the role. And I'm starting to believe a lot more in Caleb Williams at this point as well. The second receiver I wanted to mention here is Darnell Mooney. I don't know that you're going to be able to get him. Whoever has him, probably had him off the wire, has been starting him, and his role has been so good. I mean, he's on the field for like 100 or 95% of the snaps. The offense is so concentrated in him and Drake London, a little bit of Kyle Pitts, a little bit of Bijan Robinson, right, in the passing game, I mean. But he is getting so much work. He's getting so much volume. So if anybody that has Mooney is still benching him, anybody that has Mooney doesn't think they have a top 25 receiver, you need to take advantage of that. You need, like, if you have a Kareem Hunt who you just added and you could trade him for Darnell Mooney, that would be something I would be looking to do. If you have, again, like obviously I just mentioned JuJu, but if you have somebody that you're not playing, right? You have Wan'Dale Robinson and a Rachaad White. Those are two players I have on my team. If I could trade those two for Mooney, I would be doing that at this point. He's very good. He's still young, very explosive, and Kirk loves him down the field. He's scoring as well. Like, he is an excellent player. He's in an excellent situation, and he's getting a lot of work. So Mooney, again, somebody you're probably not looking at as that big of a player, right? As a locked and loaded top 25 receiver, and he could be more than that. Start looking at him that way and start trying to talk up whoever has Mooney in your league to go get him. Tight end that I wanted to mention here, again, is sticking with that theme of bad game going into a bye week. So he's matched with Dak in that 3 for 11, really disappointing game, but they just never had the ball. They were not prepared for Detroit at all. They got completely overwhelmed on offense, and it just turned into like chucking it to CeeDee Lamb every single time. And that didn't work out that well either. I mean, 14 targets, he had 7 for 95 or whatever it was. That's not that good of a stat line. I know in the box score and in your matchups, that seems pretty good, but only 95 yards on 14 targets is not good, not efficient. That was not the move. Ferguson was kind of forgotten about in this game, but that's obviously not going to be the case. I mean, he had 11, 7, 7 targets coming into this game, and he's going into his bye week. So if you have, say, Evan Engram, who just went off, and the team that has Ferguson is struggling, record-wise is 2-4, 1-5, 3-3 even, and they really need a win in week 7, and you can convince them Evan Engram for Jake Ferguson. Maybe you add like a bench receiver or something into sweeten the pot, or if they need something specifically for a bye week, I would be looking to do that. I'd be looking to get Ferguson everywhere you can. It is tough to give up a starter for a tight end. So if they're looking for Darnell Mooney and for Jake Ferguson, that I'm not interested in that. I'd rather just continue to play the carousel until you find production somewhere. right? Like Tucker Kraft, right? He kind of came out of nowhere, and now he's tight end 4 on the season. Like you can find tight end. Don't give up a starter, right? But if you can give up your tight end or a bench tight end, right? If you've been dealing with injuries at tight end, or you just had a bye week and you got Kraft, say I would definitely be trying to upgrade Kraft into Ferguson if you can. Obviously a down week here, and you'll have to deal with it bench wise because you'll have to start somebody else this week. But I do think over the rest of the season, again, I said Dallas's schedule gets a lot easier. This is somebody you for sure want on your team. Last guy, Tucker Kraft, just mentioned him. So I would trade him to get Ferguson, but I do think Kraft as a buy low here is definitely worthy of consideration. He just had a 2 for 13. He could have had another catch for like 20 or 30 yards. Love just kind of missed him. It was like the third play of the game and just missed him, unfortunately. And kind of felt like, oh man, he's going to have a good game if he's getting targets like that. Never really materialized. So if you can buy low on Kraft, I would try and do that as well, right? I do have a lot of faith in him as a top 10 option at tight end. He's on the field for almost all the plays. Again, played over 85% of the snaps in this one. He is definitely a major part of this Green Bay offense. Wicks is going to be week to week, not going to be out there a lot. Watson is back and Doubs is back. So, that could limit his opportunities maybe. But I mean, we just saw 2 weeks ago how explosive he can be even on 5 targets. So touchdown opportunities here. Really good offense with a quarterback who trusts him and love. And so I would really be looking to get Kraft on the cheap this week off of a bad game if somebody doesn't believe in him as a top 10 tight end option for the rest of the year. All right, and with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subbed yet, click that subscribe button, click that like button. If you want the rankings, comment rankings down below. We'll get you our week 7 rankings. That should be in the post description as well. And let us know in the comment section if you have any other questions on trades, on waivers, on fab. Let us know. We're here for you. We want to know. We'll get comments back to you down in the comments section. So without further ado, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.